Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Okay, well, let me now introduce Dale Borglum, who is our speaker and teacher for today. Dale is the founder and executive director of the Living/Dying Project, and in Dale's words, it's all about the slash between how you live informs how you die, and the fact that we're going to die hopefully informs how we live. Dale's a pioneer in the conscious dying movement. He's been helping thousands of people for 30 to 40 years who have life-threatening illnesses and helping their families. In 1981, Dale founded the Dying Center, the first residential facility for people wishing to die consciously in the U.S. He's been teaching and lecturing on spiritual support for those with life-threatening illnesses, caregiving as a spiritual practice, and healing at the edge of illness, death, loss, and crisis. He's part of our local spiritual intelligence. He's a graduate of Berkeley and Stanford. And he is the co-author of a book called Journey of Awakening, a Meditator's Guidebook. So check that out. And the website for Living Dying is livingdying.org. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dale, and we'll hear from you until we have till about 11:50. You can save time for questions and answers. And I'm going to spotlight you now. So thank you, Dale.
Well, welcome, everybody. It's great to see some old faces that I haven't seen for a while. And I was just thinking about my own practice lately and thinking about the fact that we're about 10 months into COVID. And it seems really like it's almost becoming a retreat in a way. And I was just thinking about how rather than just doing the same meditation all the time, is there a way to deepen practice while we have this opportunity? So I'd like to talk about deepening practice, meditation as a healing path, meditation as the one of the most direct vehicles to awakening. And I know that many people, myself included, first come to meditation as a way of not suffering so much. My life was a mess. I want to not have it be such a mess. I like to be a little more present, a little calmer, a little happier, a little more loving. And I think it's easy to continue in that mode of just using meditation as a sort of like a pick-me-up of something I'm doing to make my life a little better, like you'd be doing yoga or aerobics or something. And I think that actually beyond that, it's possible to, if we investigate things clearly enough, to begin to see that freedom from suffering, union with Buddha nature is really not that far away. So let me just briefly explore the path to doing that, and we will leave some time then for questions and answers. So really we're talking here about going beyond I who am meditating, or is it a good meditation, or what are the results of my meditation, and beginning to explore what is preventing us from fully dying into the process, dying into life, dying into the meditation practice. In a very direct way, pain is the doorway. And maybe that doesn't sound like good news, but at the same time, pain arises in our lives. My dear friend Stephen Levine said, pain is mandatory, suffering is optional. If we have a body, if we have a dualistic mind, there's going to be pain. And there is such a strong conditioned response when pain arises to try to get away from it, to automatically distract, avoid, deny, run away. And in Buddhism, this is the Gay Buddhist Fellowship. I don't know how much of a Buddhist I am, but I can talk Buddhist at least. In Buddhism, people take vows. In Theravada Buddhism, in Mahayana Buddhism, in Vajrayana Buddhism. And the vow that's taken, the first vow in Theravada Hinayana Buddhism, is basically the vow not to run away. The vow to slow down, pay attention. What's really going on here? One way of doing this is taking refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And really taking refuge in the Buddha is essentially saying, I trust that I am already whole, that who I am is a pure expression of Buddha nature. And even though I'm kind of a neurotic mess sometimes, underneath it all, I trust this wholeness, and that all I have to do really is slow down and begin to pay attention to how suffering is arising in my life, to slow down and see the empty nature of reality. So rather than blaming the environment, blaming what's happening politically, environmentally, medically, economically, can we instead slow down enough to see that it is our reactivity, our relationship with our experience that is causing the suffering, not necessarily the circumstances themselves. We begin to replace obstacles with wholesome qualities. And we not only just pay attention to what's going on in the present moment, but can we begin to work in a bit more analytical way with our practice so that as we see that our mind is agitated or that we're anxious or that we're bored or whatever it might happen to be, what's going on underneath that? Can we really be with the sensations in our body? Can we let go of the narrative? Can we let go of the story that is so compelling? My story is so compelling. I got mailed a book called Being Ram Dass, which I think is going to be released on the 21st in a couple of weeks. And it's like 500 pages of Ram Dass's story. Everybody has such an interesting story, right? And the point is that, yes, the story is interesting, but is there some ongoing tension between my story and making it a better story and the true nature, the empty nature of reality? And when I say the empty nature, what I really mean is that there isn't fundamentally an I beyond the concept of I. So that there's this tension between the empty nature, the groundless nature of our existence and the needs of the ego structure. So this first vow, this first turning of the wheel in Buddhism is taking a vow that I'm going to begin to look at how suffering arises. I'm going to slow down. I'm going to stop running away. And I'm going to see what's really going on here. What's going on in my body? What's going on in my relationships with the outside world, if you will, rather than being lost in stories about what it is that's happening. How often have you or I really felt fear or anger? Or is it when fear and anger arise that immediately we fixate on the trigger? I'm angry at those Republicans for tearing up the Capitol building. I'm angry at the government for not getting the COVID vaccine out more quickly. I'm angry at whatever it might be, or I'm afraid that ... Instead of fixating on the trigger, slow down and be with things exactly the way they are. So as we do this, as the mind begins to slow down, the heart quality of the mind begins to be revealed. We move on then to Mahayana Buddhism, the greater vehicle. And we begin to come much more interested in our relationship with experience than the content itself. Can we have a loving, a compassionate, a grateful relationship with experience, regardless of its content? Can we make now the second vow, the Bodhisattva vow, to open to the pain of the world, including your own pain? I've been really thinking about what can we do during this time of COVID. People aren't able to go out and hug and have the same kinds of relationships. But at the same time, I've been finding that just sitting in my room and doing compassion practice for all beings. Right now I've got clients who are dying. I've got friends who are having a hard time. So I start out with people that I know, and I move on to a larger and larger group of people that I feel compassion for. And as I do this, it is so much more gratifying than all the best stuff you could find on Netflix. That trusting this quality of surrender into the heart is really a path to wholeness. The Dalai Lama says, if you want other people to be happy, practice compassion. If you want to be happy, practice compassion. And Rumi famously said that grief is the garden of compassion. So that all of us are carrying some grief. If it's not about what's going on right now with the pandemic, we've lost part of our childhood dream. We've lost people to illness, to age, to death, to relationships ending. And as we accumulate grief and don't fully process it during our lives, we begin to armor our hearts. And it becomes just second nature to assume that this underlying sense of grief, this quiet, desperate grief, this quiet anxiety, is the nature of human existence. And it's not. Our Buddha nature is so much vaster than the protected heart. So that in Buddhism, they say that the qualities of the open heart are, firstly, a spacious heart, a heart that is beyond concept. Secondly, a heart that's connected to ourselves, connected to each other, and connected to Buddha nature, to Christ consciousness, to the Divine Mother, whatever we want to call that. Suzuki Roshi said the most important thing is finding the most important thing. And during this time when there is so much obvious suffering in the world, at least one of the most important things for me is trusting that opening to the pain of other people is my path to freedom, my path to liberation from suffering. Anais Nin, the wonderful writer, said, if you limit your choices to what seems possible or reasonable, you disconnect yourself from what you truly want, and all that is left is compromise. So that as we begin to go into the heart, we begin to see the profound spaciousness, the empty quality, that the heart is boundless. It's big enough to include all the suffering in the world. If we just let our meditation be, I'm going to pay attention to my breath, yes, eventually Vipassana, mindfulness meditation can bring us to freedom. But recent studies have shown that a few really interesting things. One of them is that mindfulness creates a stronger sense of well-being, not too unexpected. But they found that if you add compassion to mindfulness, it greatly speeds up the movement into well-being. So that now there's two things to do. We're not just paying attention, but we're being alert to those places where the heart closes. And we're trusting that we can open even to that. And that greatly speeds up the movement into wholeness, into a greater sense of well-being. And then thirdly, even more recent studies have shown that meditating on emptiness, on the sacred nature of things, speeds this process up even more and more quickly. So what I'm getting at here is that we're kind of on a long retreat. And it's so easy to just let our practice be, okay, I'm going to sit down and get a little quieter today? Can we go to the depth of our heart? Can we sit down and really feel those images that we've seen about what happened in the Capitol building? Or maybe, people who've had COVID or who have died or have loved ones who had. So the second vow, the Bodhisattva vow, and I'll repeat the Bodhisattva vow because it is so remarkable and so impossible. Sentient beings are numberless. I vow to save them. I'm vowing to save every sentient being. Desires are inexhaustible. I vow to put an end to them. The dharmas, the teachings, are boundless. I vow to master them. The Buddha's way is unsurpassable. I vow to attain it. So clearly, you or I aren't going to end all human suffering, all sentient suffering today or tomorrow. And we're probably not going to put an end to all desire today or tomorrow. But just taking that vow, just pointing our life in that direction is such a strong impetus to waking up again and again and again, rather than just saying, I'm going to make a New Year's resolution, I'm going to meditate a little more. Now you take a vow, and then when you break the vow, you repair the vow through pure intention. And that will happen so many different times a day. The third vow is that after our compassion deepens enough, then through this vastly spacious heart, we begin to really get that this I fixation is just one thought. It's not something that needs to be destroyed. It's not the enemy, but it's not really who we are. It's something that's a tool. It's something we can use, so that as we're not so fixated on the I, the sacred nature, the tantric nature of reality begins to arise. Tantra is not about renunciation or even gradually transforming obstacles through compassion, but seeing the nature of the world as divine, as a manifestation of Buddha nature of the Divine Mother. So we're not any longer then approaching practice from a sense of inadequacy or poverty. I'm not practicing because I need to get better. No, we're approaching it from a standpoint of fullness and romance. There's a love affair with reality, with who we are as one being. My Guru Maharaji said, see God in everything. Mother Teresa, when she would pick a leper out of the gutter in Calcutta, said, I'm seeing Christ in his distressing disguise. So now, instead of being aware of obstacles and replacing them as we did in Theravada practice, or slowly transforming obstacles through love and compassion as we do in Mahayana practice, we instantaneously transmute obstacles into its sacred component by realizing that is its nature. We're going beyond seeing obstacles as a problem, and they become opportunities for awakening. And in fact, in Tantric Buddhism and Tibetan Buddhism, the more difficult the emotion is, it's felt the greater energy is available for awakening. If you're really angry, if you're really upset, if you're really frightened, it's easier if you have strong enough commitment to see the nature of what it is that's really going on. Tantra is the releasing of all goals and attainments, letting go of all our attachments through loving kindness, that every cell in our body is filled with this pure consciousness. So that in Tantric Buddhism and Tibetan Buddhism, they say very clearly that the easiest way to achieve enlightenment is to open the heart through compassion and tantric devotion, and then non-duality, the oneness of things, becomes revealed. To try to go to non-duality using the mind is a very steep path. But if, in fact, we open the heart, we see that this I that we're so tightly clinging to is just one cloud in the vast sky of mind, then this surrender into becoming nobody, of having an ego but not being an ego, of having a body but not being a body, is an act of loving surrender rather than a monumental step. So what I'd like to do before we have questions and answers is do a very short meditation. It's only 2 breaths long, and it summarizes everything we've done here. And it's something I came up with. It's called, strangely enough, the 2-breath meditation. So there's 2 breaths. The first in-breath is up. The first out-breath is down. The second in-breath is in. The second out-breath is out. And what I mean by that is, on the first in-breath, we just imagine God is a little hook on top of our head, or Buddha nature, whatever you want to call that. And we get motivated. Our spine straightens out. And on the second out-breath, we drop down into the belly. We become centered. On the second in-breath, we breathe into the heart. And on the second out-breath, we expand infinitely in all directions into spaciousness from the heart. So it's up, down, in, out. And after you do that for a minute or so, we can let go of the first breath, just breathe into the heart and breathe out into spaciousness, particularly paying attention to that space right at the end of the out-breath. When we completely let go of breath and there's nothing there, what's there? Okay, so once again, let me grab my bell. Once again, first in-breath, you straighten up, you feel a sense of motivation. First out-breath, you drop down into the lower belly. Second in-breath, you breathe into the center of your heart, letting your heart break open. Second out-breath, you breathe out, front, back, up, down, right, left, all directions infinitely. Surrender into spaciousness. Do this on your own for a few breaths, please. And then let go of the first breath, just breathing into the heart, breathing out into spaciousness, maybe noticing that it's harder to breathe out in the back than in the front, or below than above, whatever it is for you, and paying particular attention to the end of the exhalation, right after the exhalation. The notion of an empty heart can be a bit confusing. A heart that is empty is full. It's so empty of self that it is full of true nature, of love. And yet, being empty of self is great surrender. It's radical surrender. It's letting go of who we think we are again and again and again. Trusting that which we invoked in the beginning, the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha. So we have about a little less than 20 minutes. I'd like to spend plenty of time with conversation. I find that during these times of COVID, it's great to have times where people can hang out together. And if anybody has any comments or questions or remarks.
I do. Here.
Okay.
The fellowship, we donate to the fellowship, and it goes to give our newsletter to people incarcerated.
Uh-huh.
Well, I went to jail in 2017 for 3 days, and my roommate was a porn star who murdered his boyfriend. It was all over the papers. You were just mentioning compassion and such, so I sent him a Hanukkah card, and he sent me this. Oh, my world. First of all, let me explain to you what your lovely card has did to me. He's Iraqi, so he's not great with English. It was 4:15 a.m. when Pop handed me your card. Instantaneously, I felt joy and happiness. You know why? Because no one has thought of me the happiest time of the year. Thank you. From the root of my soul. Okay, skip ahead. Because he says I had a hot body and a nice beard. Anyway, so it goes. And I thank you very much about the GBF. You mentioned this, folks. GBF newsletter. I loved it. And more precisely, I do meditate every day, 20 minutes, and at yoga at 5 a.m. every day since mid-2019. So when I received the newsletter last month, I was so happy. Thank you again and again and again. He said it 3 times. So that's it. I figured that was the best way to share it with all of you.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Hello, I'd like to say something.
Yes, Matthew.
Hi. Thank you, Dale, for the talk. I love the 2-breath meditation. I'm going to use that. Thank you for giving that to us. I felt like your Dharma talk has given me an opportunity to bring up something that I've been contending with, and that is because I've been telling my friends, is like, I don't think of it as sheltering in place. I think of it as an extended spiritual retreat, and gosh, my mind just went out. And so with all of us being asked to slow down, I've been taking full advantage of that. But one of the things that I've been coming to terms with is that these circumstances have not had the adverse impact that it has on so many lives. It hasn't impacted me financially. It hasn't impacted me with my health or with anybody, with anybody that I know. And so the thing that I'm coming to terms with is when I look back over the past 10 months, it all seems like this incredible gift that's been given to me. And so the challenge is, how do I acknowledge that and yet still acknowledge the extreme suffering that people are going with? If I want to break down crying, all I have to think about these days are the people who are dying without their loved ones being able to be by their side. And so the way I've been dealing with it is through gratitude practice, and generosity. And I've been surprised at the opportunities, the many, every day, the opportunities to practice generosity. So anyway, that's kind of what I've been dealing with. If you have any thoughts on that, but thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for those words. And we put out a newsletter once a year. You might go to our website, livingdying.org, and look under education and under newsletters. And I wrote an article called Hardcore Love, the lead article for the newsletter. And what I said there was really almost exactly what you're talking about, Matthew. And that is that what I found is most useful, gratifying, uplifting for me is two things. One is doing compassion practice for other people, as I mentioned before, and even learning to trust that I can do it for not just a few people, but for everybody. And the second thing is work with my relationship with the darker faces of God. That COVID and death and violence are also part of the wholeness. And it's so easy to stand back and say, we're privileged, we're not being affected financially, we're not being affected medically, and in some kind of protected, slightly precious way. And I'm not saying this is what you're doing at all, that we just kind of stand back and project some nice, loving feelings out there. But at the same time, begin to see both in this larger sense of what's going on in society, but also in our own self, when there are negative emotions, that too is something we can have this tantric relationship with. That the path to freedom eventually means realizing that it's all the face of God, or it's all Buddha nature. It's not just the good stuff. That being more alert to our propensity to say, this is good, this is bad, this is evil, this is not evil. And I'm not saying here that we become stupid, but we learn to have a spacious heart and a spacious mind in the context of all the change that's going on. So it's been hard this last week to keep completely open-hearted when we see what's been happening in Washington, D.C., and I think that what's been happening is not the end of something, but the beginning of something, unfortunately. This is going to continue. But the Buddha said that hating somebody is like taking poison and expecting the other person to die. And so can we learn to keep our heart open even when we are in profound disagreement with other people's behaviors? And so then having this compassion and having this space to deepen our practice during COVID, maybe we can find the depth to do that.
Can you say something about the hate associated with the white supremacist racist insurrection that actually took place, led by a white racist supremacist president, Donald Trump? Thank you.
Am I saying something? You want me to say something about their hate or us hating them, or who's hating who here?
Well, we live in a white supremacist America, a racist white supremacist America. The insurrection was about Confederate flags, which is based on slavery and racism and the degradation of African Americans primarily. As a Buddhist, how do we be fully what the Buddha calls us to be in terms of, I believe very strongly in engaged Buddhism. And we've had a number of people who've come here over the years and talked about engaged Buddhism. Right. And the most important thing is engaging our hearts, not turning away from. And the problem is the media and everyone else turns away from. We've got this Black Lives Matter movement going, and now we have this white supremacist, racist, Confederate flag thing going on. So we got this yin and yang thing going on. And I think the biggest problem is just acknowledging things for what they really, really are. I think that's part of it. But I don't know how you look at that. How do you deal with living in this society without racism? We would not have a lot of the problems that we have right now in terms of the ecological issues, in terms of global warming. The reality is we're not going to be able to solve these problems because we're not looking at what the source of the problem is the wealth of America is built on the enslavement and the degradation of Black people. That's why the N-word is designed. So we can't turn away. Thich Nhat Hanh says we don't turn away from suffering. We don't hide from the suffering. So I just wanted to hear your comments.
Yeah. Well, in Buddhism, the qualities of the awakened heart-mind are threefold. One is great clarity, the knowing quality. We know what's going on. The second is great spaciousness. And the third is naturally arising compassionate activity. And I have a profoundly deep faith that if I cultivate compassion, compassionate activity, engaged compassion will arise out of that will be appropriate to the situation. So that whether we're talking about racism or we're talking about any other aggression or violence or
no, we are talking about racism and white supremacy. No question about it.
Well, that's what I'm saying. But my point here is that if we do our practice, if we lean into our suffering, if we become warriors of compassion, if we do the daring practice of looking at our own suffering, then naturally arising compassionate activity will follow from that. And no matter, it's always been the human condition. I don't think it's any worse now than it's ever been before. Maybe it's amplified by social media or regular media, but there's always ignorance and aggression in this world. The Buddha said that out of 1,000 people, only one gets on the path, and out of 1,000 people who get on the path, only one of them gets to the end of the path. It's 1 out of 1,000,000. Now, whether the odds have changed in the last 2,500 years, I'm not sure. But what I'm saying is that there's always going to be ignorance. And
so therefore we're accepting it. We're accepting the fact that
I'm not saying that at all.
We benefit from a white racist supremacist society. You, all of us.
Yeah, I'm not saying we accept it. What I'm saying is that if we take refuge in the Buddha and the Dharma and the Sangha, we will act. If we really trust that our nature is compassion, we will be driven to action. It's not accepting things.
Amen.
It's accepting who we are as an expression of Buddhahood. And whether you choose, I'm not particularly involved in some of the issues you're talking about. I'm involved.
You are a white man in a white racist society, and you benefit from the racism that goes on. This is part of
what I'm trying to say. I don't want to argue here. What I'm trying to say is that my niche, the way I'm trying to create change in society, is through conscious dying, working with people who are dying of all colors, shapes, and sizes. Maybe your thing is more, I'm not denying that I'm a white guy with a PhD from Stanford living in Marin County. I'm not denying that.
Living in a white racist society and benefiting from the white racist society. That's what
and what I'm saying is, to the extent you're angry and you're caught in that anger.
I'm angry because I bring the issue up.
Well, I don't think you're listening to me.
I'm listening to you very, very closely.
It doesn't seem like it. What I'm saying is, I admit that I'm a white guy with a PhD living in Marin, and I'm working night and day to help people die better. That's the way I've chosen to serve.
So you deny the reality that you benefit immensely from being a white man in the society. I think we have to take ownership of that.
Excuse me.
I'm not taking ownership of that. I don't know what we're fighting about here.
Facilitator, can I just ask that we maybe take a second and take a breath and bring our tone to a loving, kind tone? And
I feel like I'm being accused of something here, right? That's not the way to create change. I don't think. People like Gandhi and Martin Luther King and Nelson Mandela, people that really changed the planet, were people who did it with love and compassion, not violence and anger. And anger is a useful motivation for action if we're not lost in anger, if we can be present through the anger. But as soon as we get lost in it, as soon as the temperature goes up, then our actions become much less wise and compassionate. So once again, I admit who I am, and I'm choosing. I work very hard, night and day sometimes, to help people who are dying. People are calling me all the time. I'm 78 years old, and I'm working as hard as I can, right? So that I have not chosen to fight racism. I've chosen to fight denial of death. That's my niche, okay? And I'd like to move on to the next remarks or questioner. We've only got a couple more minutes, actually, here.
Hey, Dale, it's Tom Bruin.
Can you say more about how you work with denial of death?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's very individual depending on which client patient I'm working with. But all fear is fundamentally based in feeling separate. All fear is fear of death. And fear of death is equal to lack of enlightenment. So that the place where we're afraid, the place where we fall back into anger, into separateness, and me versus them, without accepting what's going on out there and roll over. I'm not saying that. That's the place where we need to pay attention. Okay, so that even in meditating, you're sitting there meditating, the mind is opening up, the mind is quiet, and all of a sudden a bunch of thoughts come. Those thoughts are pretty much the result of fear of spaciousness, fear of death, of the ego wanting to reify itself. And whether it's reifying itself by agitation during meditation or racist thought, it's still that same fundamental fear of I'm separate, I've got to protect myself, I've got to aggrandize in relationship to what's going on out there. So that right now I've got a client who's a younger guy. He's like a very beautiful young man. He's dying of a brain tumor. He's had this brain tumor for a number of years. And as he's going through this, we've been working with any fear that he has. And slowly, he's identifying who he is rather than being frustrated that he's not who he used to be. And that's pretty much the job for all of us. That can we be with that underlying fear that causes us to deny our mortality, even before these three turnings of the wheel I talked about in the main part of my Dharma talk today. Very often, motivating truths are contemplated. And the first truth that is contemplated is you're going to die, but you don't know when. If everybody in this room knew that you were going to die, but you didn't know when, then how would it change the way we were being together? How much could we love each other if we didn't know we were ever going to see each other again? If you didn't know you were going to wake up tomorrow, what would it change in your heart in terms of us being vulnerable and loving and supportive in this room together and being inspired to create change in the world both? So I think my time is up. I encourage you to come to our website, livingdying.org. There's more free material there about conscious dying than any place on the internet. I have a group on Monday nights that some people are in. There's, I think, space for one person in it right now. I have a free of charge Saturday morning, every other Saturday, 9 to 11, California's Zoom group that has about 120 people signed up for it. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Dale. Thanks so much, Dale. All right. So at this time, we take a pause for announcements. Does anyone have an announcement?
Out of the hospital after being paralyzed for 4 months, and I feel great. And I'm really happy to see all of you. So that's my announcement. Sorry.
Great.
Yeah.
Jason.
In case you're wondering.
Much more well. Also, I'm posting in the chat. You can hear recordings of past talks. You can look at our newsletter, and also call for Donna. Donna is the Pali word for generosity, and GBF asks for a donation between $10 or $20. It helps our Sangha pay for speaker honorariums, the newsletter that we send out to prisoners, which Jason mentioned earlier, and when we're back in human contact, we'll have Larkin Street dinners and things like that. So, and thank you also, big thank you to those of you who contributed to the annual fundraiser, to the annual donation. I've been pulling those out of the mailbox, so appreciate that. Any other announcements?
On Wednesday evenings at 7:30, we have the GBF Live group, we call it. It's a meditation for half an hour and then a discussion group. And you're welcome to attend both parts or one of them, or none.
Gary?
Yes, next week we have our Dharma duo. We haven't had one in a long time, and this is where we have two members of the Sangha come and talk about their past and how they came to GBF. And next they're David Hunt and Jason Hancock.
Any other announcements?
Obama's autobiography is magnificent. I highly recommend it.
Thank you. Others?
I have a quick. I wanted to say an acknowledgement. I just want to acknowledge the challenging feelings that are going on, I think, in terms of Asa's comments and the challenge in regards to the conversation with Dale. And I just want to acknowledge that I think that that's something that's important to be present to and to engage with as much as we can. I know that these feelings feel uncomfortable. They're hard conversations, but they're really important conversations. And I know this is challenging because we're not in a live room with each other. We can't have community afterwards. But if there's any way to try to keep having these conversations, keep making the space for these conversations, I really just want to acknowledge that. And just a small thing of acknowledgement too. My name is Jason Torres Hancock. So if you can please not forget that part. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you, Jason.
All right. At this point, we do our dedication of merit. Dale, we have a regular dedication, but I offer the space to you if you have a special dedication you'd like to use.
No, I'll let you do what you generally do. I would appreciate that.
All right. By the power and truth of this practice, may all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all be free from sorrow and the causes of sorrow. May all never be separated from the sacred happiness, which is without sorrow. And may all live in equanimity without too much attachment or too much aversion, believing in the equality of all that lives.
Will you be keeping the room open?
Yes. Yeah. Oh, sorry. I should have said the room is open if you want to stay and chat or have any questions. Dale, do you have any time to hang out with us, or what's your time budget?
I can be here for a little while.
Okay. Thank you very much, by the way, for your talk.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Thank you, Dale. Thank you, Grisha.
Dale, thank you so much for a very thought-provoking talk and for the techniques, for the two-breath meditation. I think is a wonderful practice that I'm going to use. It was great to experience it. So, did you? I presume. If given that your area of concern is death and dying, did you were in practice during the AIDS pandemic?
I was, yeah. I was going both into San Quentin and Highland Hospital in Oakland, working with AIDS patients.
A lot of us got a crash course in confronting something that at a period of our lives when it was like the last thing any of us expected to be dealing with. And it was a gateway to compassion, I think.
Dale, I have a question. I really liked how you described the turnings of the wheel and the development of Buddhism and practices. And do you think that the individual's development parallels that necessarily?
Yeah. In a word. I mean, so that this trajectory from motivation to embodied mindfulness to open-hearted, loving compassion, gratitude, to tantric understanding of the sacred nature of things, to non-duality, is, even though it's the structure of Buddhism, if you were a Christian or a Jew or a Hindu or a Muslim, one goes through those same stages of learning to pay attention, opening the heart, beginning to see the nature of things, and then finally surrendering into union, if you will. Mm-hmm. So it's a trajectory of time or through many lifetimes. It can also, though, be the trajectory of 5 seconds or 5 minutes, when one notices that you're caught in anger, just as an example that maybe came out of today, where you're caught in a feeling. What does this feel like in my body? Can I have compassion for the part of me that's lost? Can I see that even anger is part of true nature, etc.? That we can use this trajectory or this progression as a moment-to-moment practice, as well as a guide for the overall evolution of our spiritual life.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense to me. So it's saying in a way also, well, in a way, yeah, that just staying with one practice isn't necessarily going to do it. If you.
No. I don't want to say that at all.
Okay.
That certainly you can get enlightened just doing Vipassana.
Okay, that's what I want to know. Yeah.
But at the same time, if you go deeply enough into Vipassana, your heart will open. You'll begin to see the nature of things. And what we're saying here is that, and first of all, most of us don't have a day-to-day, moment-to-moment teacher saying, try this, then do that, and then get divorced, and then become a vegetarian, and then do this practice. That we're having to choose and figure out our own practice moment-to-moment, right? So that having this developmental path, we can begin to see where we're going, what the direction is. And so that, that's kind of what I was trying to point out in the beginning, that instead of just staying with mindfulness, begin to be really alert to the possibility that as you're more and more mindful, the heart is beginning to open, and you can begin to cultivate that heart. You can begin to do Tonglen or compassion practice or gratitude practice. And as the heart becomes more and more open, you can be alert to this next stage of the tantric nature of things, the sacred nature of things, that the good and the bad, the up and the down, it's all part of Buddha nature, right? So that by seeing that there is this structure intellectually, then it helps us keep moving forward if there's any movement. That's kind of, there's nowhere to go, there's nothing to do. I just got a quote in my email this morning from Rumi. He said, "Sell your cleverness and buy bewilderment." Sell your cleverness and buy bewilderment. So maybe instead of trying to figure all these things out, can we trust the bewilderment of the heart? Can we not really need to figure it all out? So I think both are useful at times, particularly when we don't have a teacher, most of us, though we're kind of on our own. And the problem with being on our own is that the neurotic structure, the superego, is also in there telling us what to do and not do next, which is often based on a faulty assumption of poverty and inadequacy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
So I'd like to just acknowledge, I know that it became a tense moment, but I felt like I feel unresolved because I didn't feel that there was a checking in with Asa at the end to see if that was okay. And again, that makes me feel that that's a silencing of a Black man. And I do not appreciate that. And within this group, I would have just appreciated a checking in with him before moving on. So that is just my feelings, and I wanted to just express that because it feels unresolved.
Okay, so I'd like to say that you said it was a tense moment. It wasn't a tense moment. You were tense, maybe. By blaming the environment for what you're feeling is not allowing you to be present for what it is that's going on. And I did not try to silence him. I thought we were having a discussion, and he got increasingly upset with me. That was my experience. I didn't feel tense or upset particularly. And I didn't know he was a Black man. The only picture I saw was a picture of a wall. So, I mean, if he's still here and wants to talk about things, I'm available.
You brought up the issue about the events of the week. And the events of the week was Confederate flags, insurrection in our most precious and sacred place.
Who's speaking now? Who's speaking?
This is Asa.
Okay.
This is Asa speaking. Speaking. You mentioned in your share that you talked about the events of the week and how we felt about it. And we've had Black Lives Matter protests. Now we've had something very unique. We have people running around with Confederate flags in a white supremacist environment. I mean, it's really surrealistic. This is surrealism. Where is Magritte when we need Magritte? And the other thing is, I'm a Black guy. I speak loud. I speak passionately. I'm not angry. I'm just not. I would be angry if I left and didn't speak for my mom and my dad and my sisters and my brothers and my life. I walk away with suffering. But we all participate in the American experiment, which was based on the enslavement, the stealing of the land from the Native Americans, killing them, genocide, and then enslaving Black people. 70% of the people in prison are Black people. You know, and 35% of the population is of that, and 70% of the population is white. My only point is this. I don't want to be loquacious, but my only point is that I have to accept who I am. I have to accept the privileges. I have male privileges. And if I'm a white man, I have white privilege in a white supremacist society. And that's all I'm saying. It's important for me to acknowledge that. The thing is that if Black people are to be welcomed into the Gay Buddhist Fellowship, we need to acknowledge the fact that Black people won't come here. They're not going to come here if they don't feel welcomed and feel that people honestly recognize what was going on. For example, for me, what was going on was a bunch of people running around with Confederate flags. We already know the president is racist. He's made huge racist statements. And the people who are following him, he says Proud Boys. The Proud Boys are nothing but the modern KKK. Proud Boys stand by. Stand by to do what? To kill me? So I don't mean to be dramatic, but we're homosexuals. A lot of us are homosexuals here. I'm gay. And we used to go through gay bashing, and people say, oh, well, those gay people, and all this stuff. But we live in a racist, sexist, homophobic, misogynist, and anti-Semitic. We got a lot of stuff going on in society.
I got all that, and I get all that, and all I was trying to do was present a structure to deal with those feelings, whether you're gay or straight, white or Black, rich or poor. And I didn't really feel I was arguing with you or denying my white privilege. I was talking about something a little bit different. You wanted to bring it there. I thought I responded.
Yeah. See, I don't see the separation.
I don't either.
I don't see the distinction. We're all in this together. We're living, that's where I'm at. So I don't make the separation that, this, that, and the other thing, we're all living in the same country, and we live in this mess. We have a mess going on.
We do. We always have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I just want to say thank you for this conversation. And as a facilitator, I wasn't quite sure how to step in or if I should have stepped in. And I hope I didn't step on anybody's toes. But the way I experienced it, I shared Jason's tension. I felt very tense. And as the facilitator, I was like, there's going back and forth, interrupting each other and things like that. I thought just didn't seem, I felt discomfort. I felt the tension, and I felt like I didn't know what to do. So,
thought you handled it well, Grisha.
But I think, Asa, I think I don't know. I think that everyone in the Gay Buddhist Fellowship, understands and has compassion exactly for what you're saying. And
are you speaking for the group?
No, I'm saying, I'm just thinking out loud. That I think, based on my conversations and my interactions with everyone in the Gay Buddhist Fellowship, I think many of us, I know I do, I acknowledge my white privilege. I acknowledge I'm from Washington, D.C., and I lived in racial tension, and I have family members who are white supremacists that I can't deal with. I don't think anybody's denying any of that.
So we should be, if we're not denying it, we shouldn't have a problem talking about it. The biggest problem, I taught 5th grade last week. The biggest problem is we don't want to talk about it. The number one books on the bestsellers list is White Fragility. And the subtitle is, why is it so difficult for white people to talk about racism? And I bet you most of the people in this room are familiar with that book, and many people have read that book, and they know the title. True.
Yes, I've read it. We read it as a school. Educators are encouraged to read it because we're educating children for tomorrow. So
right. Now we have to live it.
Yeah.
And why is it so difficult for white people to talk about race? Mm-hmm. Because that's where you get black people. Because black people we already know that white folks won't talk about race. They're not going to show up. That's the big thing. It's liberating, right? It's liberating for someone to say, yeah, my uncle.
Let me jump in for a second if I could. Because I've got to go pretty soon. A couple points. One is that the tension that Jason felt and anybody else that felt tension, that's your work on yourself. When you're dying, it might be tense. When you're dying, you might be in a car with somebody you love who's screaming in terror. When you're dying, you might be with somebody who's a racist. When you're dying, you don't know. So whatever emotions are coming up in response to the conversation that we were just having, that's the exact perfect message that here's what needs to happen to your heart for you to be able to die better.
Gail, I also feel that Buddhists can be very dissociative, and so I'm not appreciating the way that you're qualifying my experience. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I would like to thank you, Dale. Actually, throughout all of this, I've been practicing your 2-breath system, and it helps a great deal.
Dale, I appreciate your point about owning or we're paying attention to our relationship to our experience. It feels like the ultimate freedom in a way. It gives us options, and I appreciate that.
So what I was saying to Jason is to not disassociate, to not say it was a tense situation, but more to associate with what you're feeling. I'm feeling tense is what would be the way to own that. And yeah, I mean, I think that actually probably a lot of meditators are less embodied than people you find in the local bar. That people go to meditation because they're not feeling comfortable in their body and they're trying to get away from that. And being with difficult feelings, having compassion for what's going on is not dissociation. It's just the opposite of that. And all I was doing was quoting what Jason said. I'm not accusing him of anything. So are there any other comments? I've got a lot to do today.
I'm not sure how to say it very well, but I somehow feel that I was very moved at what Asa said, and I somehow feel that that was more important than the big overarching Buddhist beliefs, and I feel a little bit hurt that that wasn't approached more directly, even though it's not the focus of this meeting. So I'm backing up Jason and what Jason said in that matter. Thank you.
I appreciate the willingness that people have to engage in this conversation, because this is a demonstration for me of just how difficult it is as a white person to engage in conversations about racism and about white supremacy. And I appreciate both Dale and Asa for articulating your point of view and where you're coming from and what your experience in this moment is. Thank you for that.
I see a hand up.
It's me, Kunchik Dorje. And my observation, this is probably way different from everybody else's. I was involved in activism for quite a number of years, in gay activism. It's literally before Stonewall, if only by a few months. And I did a lot of things, but I literally marched for Martin Luther King and was in the anti-war movement and so on, and did a lot of gay stuff, a lot of age-related stuff. And I became a Buddhist monk about 25 years ago. And my observation is this, that is, yes, I'm privileged. We're all privileged. We're all alive and breathing. And I acknowledge that. Living in America, we're privileged. We're living off of what the rest of the world does. I mean, we have economically enslaved virtually the rest of the planet. And as we say, that's the way the karma crumbles. It's what we do with it, not rather than how it makes us feel, I think. One of the things that activism has in common with Buddhism is karma. Karma is action, you know. And we all, even vegetarians, even Jains, who are the most nonviolent, profit from the destruction of life. I mean, you can't eat vegetables without killing animals and without herbicides, pesticides, and so on. I think it's the difference between our Judeo-Christian Islamic background that we bring to Buddhism. That is, a lot of it, the central myth in Western society is martyrdom, the martyrdom of Christ, or the various other sufferings that we centralize in part of the way our thinking. The difference in Buddhism is privilege. The Buddha was born, the story goes, a prince. He was privileged. He gave it up. So, and he was able to do that because he was in a position of privilege because of his past karma. And he used that to leave his home, go out, and become enlightened in order to liberate all sentient beings from the sufferings of samsara. So, yes, I acknowledge that life has fucked us all over in one way or another. But rather than making that a central part of our existence, I think it's more beneficial to think about how we can use that to act, to change, to work. And a lot of that involves setting aside what we are what we think we are, so that we're free to act, so that we're free to think outside the box, so that we don't judge everything in terms of this is good, this is bad, but rather this situation has arisen. What can I do to use it to achieve what I want to achieve? That is to make the world a better place. So I see, that's all I have to say. It ain't what you got, it's what you do with it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Can we, are we still in the same conversation, or can I ask a different question?
Who's in charge? Nobody.
All right. Dale, are you working on a book? Are you?
I was approached by Shambhala to write a book, and I don't know if it's kind of complicated. The editor is very busy. I'm supposed to talk to her tomorrow, and I'm not going to really start until we get some things straightened out, and she's not telling me when she's available for Zoom. So maybe I'm starting writing my book tomorrow, and maybe not. We'll find out.
I remember you mentioned it before, the Shambhala was approached you, yeah.
I've been almost writing a book for 20 years now. It seems to me that we're living at a time when it's important to have a spiritual foundation, but also to have a way to manifest it in the world, to be engaged, to have engaged compassion. And Trungpa Rinpoche said that until one comes in intimate contact with death, your spiritual practice will have the quality of you being a dilettante. And whether you become intimate with death through interacting with racists, or by being at the bedside of people who are dying, or going to the charnel grounds in Tibet, or whatever it might happen to be, it doesn't really make any difference. But the point here is that we really need both. There's a lot of people who meditate who aren't very engaged in life. There's a lot of people who are really engaged in life who are doing it at a rather superficial level. They don't have an inner contemplative practice they think I'm doing, and that they're very much identified with the person who's doing. They're caught up in ownership of activity. And what I'm saying is that we really need both. We really need the spiritual dimension and the human dimension. When I'm working with dying people, it's very easy to do one or the other, to see that here's somebody who's this perfect expression of Buddhahood, and they're dying, and it's all karma unfolding, and it's all perfect. Or to see here's this human being, they've got a family, there's suffering, there's confusion, there's fear. And there's this human event that needs compassionate, skillful attention. Can I do both at the same time? Can we be with the absolute infinite spiritual dimension as well as the human, interactive, finite dimension? They're really not separate, but we think they are, and it's necessary to look at how we get stuck on one side of the equation or the other again and again and again. And I will admit that if I get stuck, it's more on the spiritual side. I will admit that I tend to be a contemplative more than somebody who's running around protesting. But I'm trying to take that contemplation to the bedsides of people who are dying, and be available on Zoom and the telephone for people who are suffering, who are contacting me from all around the world. And that's my gig. I remember once, and I'll probably get in a lot of trouble for telling the story, but that's something I like to do anyway. We were with Maharaji in India. Ramdas and me, a whole bunch of friends. And the president of India came to see him. And the president of India brought a whole entourage of people. They were a bunch of sycophants in a way. They brought all these presents for Maharaji. They made a really big deal about it. And as they were driving away up the side of the valley road in the Himalayas, Maharaji turned to somebody and said, all that fuss, and he's just a worldly king. So until we remember that all of this stuff in the world is contextualized in Buddha nature, we can really get lost in it. And until we realize people are suffering, we can get lost in the spiritual dimension. So before I say goodbye, I'd like to put in a plug for keeping both of these fully alive moment to moment in a warm, compassionate heart. Thank you all very much. I'm going to say goodbye now.
Bye, Dale.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.